welcome to the MTR Premium Network. I'm the doctor here with Winter Rain and Petty Kruger, here to introduce a new show called DocuDrunks. And I'm going to throw it over to Winter Rain, who's going to tell us why we're here.
Okay, so I love documentaries. Like, that's my bread and butter. It's what I watch all the time. I watch them all. I watch crime documentaries. I watch historical documentaries. It's just my jam. But my favorite documentaries are Black documentaries. And there's several reasons behind that. I think that our stories are always ignored. And documentaries always give me a little bit of an insight into a life that I wouldn't know. The Black experience is so unique, and a lot of times in the media we're portrayed as, one-dimensional, and we're not. So, documentaries have opened my eyes to that. And then our history is just so rich. So when Chris, approached all of us to do something or to contribute to the Premium Network, I was excited, and I really wanted to talk about, one of my favorite pastimes, and I'm able to do it with y'all. So, and I'm able to drink. So, hey, perfect, right? So, yeah, so that's why, that's why we're here. We're here to talk about something that no one else is talking about. And that's, stories about us. And I don't know, it's kind of cool to me. So
cool.
What did y'all think about it? What did y'all think about the one we're going to review today, which is 13th?
So as Winter Rain mentioned, we're going to be looking at 13th by Ava DuVernay. It was a Netflix premiere documentary detailing kind of the prison system and how the intersection of politics and race really contributes to the 13th Amendment being almost really an extension of slavery. So to answer your question, I was pissed. Not because it wasn't, a lot of it, like the first 30 minutes wasn't stuff I didn't already know. And I think we can all agree to that. It's stuff we kind of knew in terms of the historical pieces. What put the bug in my ass about this and made me so angry was just how deep corporations and big businesses have their hands in the continuation of using criminality as an extension of slavery. And you hear like, well, it's private prisons. Of course they do. We're talking about the laws that are made, their hands in lawmaking. And it was just so disgusting to me, and it made me so mad. But it was a well done documentary, but it just made me so mad.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely a brilliant documentary. And what's so pernicious about it, which is also part of why it's so painful to sit there and watch, is just the many ways in which Black and brown bodies are criminalized, which historically we know that we've always been, criminalized for the most petty to the most non-offensive things that are perceived to be offensive, like from, whistling at a white woman to just walking, down the street and not getting off the sidewalk, those sort of social codes that emerged after the Civil War that really started to cement, the Black codes that morphed into, segregation, just tiny things that could piss off any white person has over the course of decades been not only just socially been embedded to be offensive, but is also penalized, that will have you in and out of, but mostly in the criminal justice system for hopefully your entire lifetime, because that's how they make money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought this documentary was really well done. I love so much of it, and we'll just get into that later. But for me, you're right. The first 30 minutes, I was pretty familiar with everything. I've never heard of Birth of a Nation.
Really?
But no. I guess I should say I'm from Alaska. So there's a lot of there's a lot of holes in what I know about our history, which is probably why I'm always eating it up.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't grow up learning anything about our history. But I was more fascinated by how much politics plays into race. Like the fact that Bill Clinton, who, used to always piss me off when people used to call him the Black president.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he was one of the dirtiest and he really was the reason why we have some of the most stringent laws on the books today against the very people that were calling him a black president is infuriating.
Yeah.
And most of us don't know that. You know, they see him blowing on a saxophone and they think he's this, you know, great guy. And he really wasn't. He was really looking out for his own interests. So that was eye-opening for me. But overall, the documentary was really... So where do you guys want to start as far as the documentary goes? Do you want to talk about it from the beginning, or do you want to start talking about it from Ava? You know, about Ava? How do you want to do that?
Well, I would love to talk about Ava. I think Patty Kruger was going to take a little bit of that, but there's something I just had to point out, and I said this in our email, but I love the way she films things. Her visual style is so distinct. I've noticed it with
Selma?
I think is Remember Me? No, it wasn't Selma. It was a different movie that's on Netflix with Sally Richardson Whitfield and Omari Hardwick, and I forget the name of it. But then I picked it up again in Queen Sugar in this, and it is just that she frames things like a photograph. If you look at those images of people sitting there talking, from the background to the framing of the shot to the lighting, everyone is basically a photograph brought to life. And I love that about her style, because it just, for me, because I like photography, it just really draws me in.
It was visually stunning. I have to say that, especially the way they highlighted people. I really like that part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hadn't noticed that. I think maybe I was just too entrenched in all the shit I was hearing that I kind of took away from the visuals. Well, okay, I will say this. Every decade when they did the counter for how many people were in jail, that was probably like the parts of the documentary that I absolutely dreaded, because you knew that the number was going up and you were just waiting for what the result would be in not a good way.
Yeah.
And it was always disheartening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That bugged me.
Listen,
well, there's a lot in this that bugged me.
That graphic right there, it fucks with you.
Mm-hmm.
It really does.
Mm-hmm. Especially when you just how astronomically from decade to decade it was going up. It wasn't even like it was a slow increase over years. At one point when it got to the millions, it doubled.
Yeah, and that was towards the mid to late 80s, and then it quintupled by the time it got to Clinton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the image that got to me the most was when, in the very beginning, or, you know, kind of in the beginning, where she was talking about the 13th Amendment, and behind the 13th Amendment is the boat, and the way we were stuffed in the boat. Yeah, that fucked with me.
Oh, yeah.
That fucked with me hard. I was mouth open, quiet, like, shit's about to get real watching this. You know, it's kind of how I felt. So.
Yeah. I think that, and I want to know what magic Sister Ava worked on Newt Gingrich.
Yeah.
I always mess up because I was live tweeting it from the MTR account, and the quotes he had, I'm like, who is this? Did they clone him?
Yeah, that was very interesting.
Because he didn't.
That story made the news.
He's the ultimate Republican.
The fact that he said that made the news this summer, and I was like wondering
I didn't know that.
hell
I remember that
from.
one did.
I didn't know that had made the news.
Yep.
I mean, he's still a monster, but it was interesting.
Absolutely.
I didn't take away that, but he was. Yeah, it was really. It was interesting to hear what he had to say, and then that that jackass Grover when he was talking.
Grover Norquist.
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of Misfits and other British television, and all in my notes I put Grover Norquist, he's a twat, and then Michael Ho, it says he's an asshat and a twat, and I was like, I just hate them all.
Oh, for sure.
But it's one of those things where I was listening to him, and I'm like, dude, How can you sit here and say this and yet still pander to your racist constituency? Because I feel like that's what we see mostly outside of this. And maybe he felt, well, I know my constituency won't even bother to watch this, so let me keep it real for
Yeah,
them.
he was really condescending. Like when he said it's not just about being mean white people, I was like, really? Really? Okay. And I
Yeah,
do
but
like
he
how
really
Abe,
believes that.
yeah, I have no doubt in my mind
Yeah.
that he believes that, but it was still like I could have punched him in the face for saying that. And then I did like how Ava let him make his mistakes on camera. Did y'all catch that? That was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that part, Eddie?
Wait, what do you mean?
Well,
Which
he
part?
was talking about he stumbled on his words. I'm sure everyone in that
Oh,
documentary
yeah,
made some
yeah,
sort of stumblage with their words, but she didn't keep that in. But she let him stumble on his
The
words, and
homie
she
from
kept rolling.
was it the Heritage Foundation or no. The one guy who was the spokesperson for I'm APAC. It's not APAC. Who is it? Alec.
Oh,
That guy.
Alec.
He made yeah. Mm-hmm.
Michael Huff.
Yeah.
No,
Well, I'm
no,
just
not
saying, like
him.
he had some
I
slip
have them
ups
all
too,
listed. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. I like how
and
she
he
left
looked
that.
like you could
yeah.
tell he was fumbling for answers
Mm-hmm.
for some of the questions that she asked him about, like especially like Walmart and all these companies who were with them that literally used their form language to push legislation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't even know there was a such thing called Alec.
Yep.
No, and that's what blew my mind. So, like I said, the first 30 minutes, I felt like, well, I kind of knew this and blah blah blah. But then when they started talking about how deep it ran and how Alec did all this
Mm-hmm.
legislation, like the three strikes and you're out, they were behind that, and oh my God. And the fact that they were so stupid, like the one clip where they're in a session of Congress and the guy was like, no, this is my bill. I wrote it. He's like, really?
And
Because
I'm
I'm
looking
looking
at
at
the
this and
letterhead.
I'm looking at this letterhead and it's the same one as Alec. So can you explain this to me?
I mean, he was so stupid. All he did
And
was
the guy
copy
was
and
just like,
paste.
nothing to
He was
see
an
here.
idiot.
He didn't
Come on.
even copy and
Yes.
paste. He just
So,
used their damn letter and put his name on
Right.
top.
basically, and
Like,
that's what they were
dummy.
calling him on. And it's the epitome of gaslighting and privilege that has been taking place in this country over centuries. That they're just, even Michael Huff, when Ava was interviewing him, he was like, "Well, no, that's just ridiculous that we would do that." It's like, but it's proven. We have recorded evidence that this is what you did. So, like these immigrants, what I call immigrant stop and frisk laws, that was Alec. The three strikes
Mm-hmm.
laws, that was Alec. The mandatory sentencing laws, that was Alec. And it's like, it is so corrupt. And now they're like, okay, yeah, we should, since everybody's balking against the private prisons, we'll get rid of those. We'll go to electronic monitoring,
Oh my
which that
God, that
freaked
was a
me out
whole
because I'm
other
like,
level.
okay, so you're going to be able to basically, if you are electronically monitoring someone in my home, I'm not a lawyer, so I own that. But what happens in my head is that means that you have
Your
access to my
home becomes
home
the
to
prison.
access that person. Yes, but that means that the government has access to it by virtue of the fact that there is a
Mm-hmm.
prisoner housed there.
Really? I didn't even
So
catch
the
that
laws
part.
against search and seizure,
Yeah.
I don't know. That is something that I made up in my head that freaked me out. We need a lawyer to confirm that. But I'm thinking, like, if the location of that person where they're supposed to be confined is your home, how does that impact search and seizure
Well,
laws
how
and
does
your
that impact
rights?
search and seizure laws now? Because people, the law doesn't seem to always give a damn about that anyway. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it's that I would love for someone who is a lawyer that knows a little bit about this to comment on that. But there is something that, like, to the core, maybe it's just the uber independent Americanist in me that kind of rebuts at the
Mm-hmm.
fact that if I become like a ward of the state and I am confined to my home, that even there I'm still not afforded like basic protections, and or
Yeah.
that it's no better than it would be if I were still in jail, which is also pretty bad. But there's something deeply sacred about the home, and for the state to just encroach on that is like deeply upsetting.
Because that means they would have access to you no matter where.
No
Like
matter what.
you have nothing. If you can't
Right.
have your home, you have nothing. If you
Then
can't
just
have
say
that little
nowhere.
bit,
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
that's
And then how does that
it's just like
impact the family
ghettoizing a
and the
bit too.
kids? Yeah. Wow.
Hold on. Say that last part again. I missed it.
Who?
From
Me?
Patty, what did you say that
Oh,
last part? I
I
missed
said,
it.
yeah. So making you confined in that way is like another level of ghettoization.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was just astonishing the number of corporations that we saw that were a part of it. And that only as recently as Trayvon was murdered in 2012 or 13.
2014.
Was it 2014? I feel like it's been several
No,
years
because
Look
he
now.
it
would
up
be
while y'all are
20.
talking.
No, wait. I thought Mike Brown was 24. You know what? This is pissing me off.
I'm
Even
looking it
trying to
up.
figure
Oh,
it out
okay.
that we
It
have
was
so many
2012.
that we can't keep
2012.
straight when they died.
2012.
So
Mm-hmm.
2012. So Trayvon was murdered in 2012.
So,
And up until then, you had corporations like Walmart
mhm.
and Ford that were still invested in Alec, that were still putting their hands into some of these really prohibitive and oppressive laws that disproportionately impacted Black, Brown, Latino, just communities of color. And one of them that really pissed me off is Aramark. And the reason Aramark pisses me off is that, especially in a lot of places in the Midwest, Aramark is the food provider for college and K through 12 campuses. So you have this corporation who is basically providing food to our children and our college students, but more so our children who in some communities, depending on if they have a hand in that community, are also responsible in part for this school to prison pipeline in some measure.
Aramark
And
is
ugh,
like Aramark is everywhere. Like they do like uniforms, like different types of
yeah.
industries. Yeah, they're in all kinds of industries, like
Mm-hmm.
public and private. I want to say they even they do like hotels. I've seen I think they also
Mm-hmm.
do like you go to sports arenas and stuff. Oh yeah, they're pretty deeply entrenched in a lot of service areas. I think some
So
like
how do you
airlines use them
Oh,
too.
so how do you think that
and stand your
but how
ground
do you think
laws.
that
That's another
Aramark
Alec bill.
like how do you think Aramark would benefit from Alec? Are you talking about like maybe prisoners working on their stuff in the prisons for free labor? Yeah.
Yeah, because think they
Mm-hmm.
talked
Yeah,
about
so
that. And that a couple of companies, was it J.C. Penney and
uh,
Victoria's Secret? After it came to light, they finally pulled their manufacturing out of the prisons. But for a while, they were getting
What?
yeah,
that
didn't they actually
benefit.
do like the farming or whatnot? Okay, I thought there
Mm-hmm.
was like some
Yep.
part of that, but
Farming.
also that Aramark was providing the prisons specifically like food that was spoiled. Like there was creepy crawlies in people's
Mm-hmm.
food. Like they
Maggots.
were
Yeah, they were talking
yeah
about that.
yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
they were giving them like expired rotten food.
Yeah. And then you just think about the fact that the Black community really knew, but everyone was just poo-pooing us away like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. That a lot of the war on drugs, the war on crime, going all the way back to Nixon, was first an effort to squelch civil rights movements and then later to deliberately target communities of color. But just to hear the people who directly worked with the individuals and in some measure themselves helped enact those
Listen,
things
Lee
confirm
Atwater.
it.
Let me tell you something. When because he's Lee Atwater is essentially like the political strategist that developed
Oh yeah.
um,
Mm-hmm.
dog whistle code, right? So whenever you
Mm-hmm.
hear like urban,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, anything having to do with like urban, all those kind of code words, dog whistling code words, that was
Right.
him under the Nixon
Mm-hmm.
administration. So
Mm-hmm.
everything
Okay.
that sort of happened with people of color under Nixon, Lee Atwater was behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's behind the language that pretty much propelled the Southern strategy, which slowly turned the Southern Republicans into, sorry, it turned the Southern Dixiecrats into Republicans.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh.
Mm-hmm.
He was a horrible human
absolutely,
being.
absolutely contemptible. Absolutely
Mm-hmm.
contemptible. And don't even get me started on freaking Nixon. If you guys have time, gentle listeners, Google Richard Nixon tapes and count the many times he says nigger in the White House. It'll it probably won't blow your mind. It'll just dishearten you. But yeah, like they were doing obviously, obviously racist policy making, but using quote unquote, I guess, gentle words to color it as something other than what it was. But he made no bones about what that strategy was designed to do.
Yeah, he just didn't want to be recorded, but he didn't mind saying any of that stuff.
Nope.
He didn't mind it at all. I mean, that it is what it is to someone like him, you know?
Yeah, because because there was a political instance, like no matter what, they needed white voters to get out the vote. They needed to suppress the black vote, and they needed to get essentially white men to get out in droves to support their policymaking.
And what better way to do it than to install fear in them with the war on drugs and Do you guys remember the Willie Horton?
Yes.
I remember because during the Willie Horton thing, I was finishing up middle school, and I tell you, when we talk about that election, I remember a lot of people really riding for Michael Dukakis in the black community. But when I think about the 1988 election, I can't tell you what Dukakis ran on. I can tell you about those Willie Horton ads because that is how pervasive and hard they rode those ads. It was like every day, every commercial, it was about Willie Horton.
And I was in Alaska at the time,
and I
they were
love
putting
how
those
that.
out. I think I was watching some, I don't know, whether it was like the 700 Club or something as a kid. You know, that precious time between. No, I mean like that time between like the after school specials and when you get home from school and it's like a magic 2 or 3 hours where there's nothing but bullshit on TV. They used to run those Willie Horton.
Yeah,
that's his name, right? Willie Horton. Those commercials over and over
again. Yes. Well, according to Grover Norquist, we called him William Horton. It was the Democrats who keep saying Willie, you twat.
Yeah, I was 4 years old in 1988, and I was in Germany. So I don't have any recollection of that campaign. I think the first campaign I was really cognizant of was the 1994 presidential campaign. But even then, I was still, outdoors, rollerblading and shit, and really didn't care, listening to West Coast rap. So, the Willie Horton thing is only something I knew once I learned about as I got older. But the thing about Willie Horton was how these narratives about black people preying on white folks is still able to engender enough fear to get people to vote against their own interests.
Exactly.
And it's about that black, quote unquote, even if it's like fictive or overblown, that it continues to instill so much fear in people that they will just go out and vote for the person who is pro law enforcement or anti-crime or whatever it is that they use to call it.
However they spin it, yeah. Which leads me to the other thing that blew my mind, which was with the war on drugs and this is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. I remember those commercials. I did not remember how ridiculous they were until I saw them on this documentary. It's like, dang, we fell for that? Did we really fall for that? Because that is ridiculous. Not to say that drugs aren't devastating. I'm not saying that. But just the It was just
Yeah.
ridiculous.
The cooking
It was
egg, it was
ridiculous.
stupid, but I remember that. Yeah, I
Hmm.
remember
Listen,
that one.
A Nightmare on Elm Street, I want to say part 5 lampooned that commercial. You know, they had
I
like Johnny
remember
Depp.
that
They had
one.
Johnny Depp, Johnny Depp come back just to do that little cameo for one of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Yeah, but I can
I'm gonna
honestly
have
say
to look that up.
I remember that, and but it wasn't Smokey the Bear. It was the other, the McGruff, the crime
Oh
man.
yes,
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
take a
took a
bite
bite
out
out
of
of crime.
crime.
yes, I remember that
Yeah,
too.
listen,
Yeah.
I could never tell you where to go buy drugs. Like, I honestly, for you guys, I kid you not, I was a sophomore in college when I first smelled weed, and that shit smelled like burnt pine cones. I didn't know what the hell was going on. And it was all the white kids that had it. I'm like, I cannot tell you where to go and find drugs. I don't, if you ask me, I couldn't, know nothing. Absolutely have no idea.
Oh,
That's because drugs aren't pushed on anyone. Drugs sell themselves. You don't have it's not some magical Pied Piper type mess where the drugs just like, ooh, Petty, come smoke me. It's not insidious. If so, that's not how drug addiction
right.
works.
All of a sudden, I hear like Deep Purple come on in the background, and just like a bong or something starts floating in the ether.
Oh yeah. Yeah, when I lived in Alaska, that was what they did. They got high all the time, and I used to just watch. I used to think weed smelled like ass, so I never smoked it when I was a kid. But
Oh, it smells
um,
awful.
yeah, it smells unless you're around it
It
all the time.
does.
It smells like straight ass. And
Yeah.
I remember it was always white kids that had it. You know, there was a few of us black kids in
Mhm.
Alaska, and it was never us. It was always the white kids. So I always thought it was weird when they would try to
Let,
put it on us. Druggy.
let me share something with you. I live in Fairfax, Virginia. It's not like you can find me as a big county. So I don't mind putting that out there in the universe. And um, it is, while it is a diverse county, it is still primarily white. It's one of the richer counties in the nation, not the state, the nation. A lot of white folks around here. I moved here because of this job, but I stayed here because I'm like, okay, I'm a single parent. I got a teenager who's a bit of a hardhead and a know-it-all. Maybe if I come here, I might be a little safer from him falling into some
Mm.
bad habits. No, my son, I had to drug test him because it turns out he was smoking weed with his little white
Hmm.
friends in the place where they don't search it. One time when we first moved here and they were younger, we were at the basketball court and there were these white teenagers out there openly smoking weed at the basketball court like it wasn't a thing. And I'm like, really? That's how we get down here? Let
Yeah,
me
you
tell
know,
you
since
something.
it's been legal,
Because they try to make it, but it's not legal
but
in
it's legal
Virginia.
in DC,
It's still,
and where I live, you
right.
can't. Like, there are people always outside smoking it. In fact, yesterday there were people, just because it was really, really windy yesterday, there were people like outside my living room window, and I'm on like the second floor, and the shit
Mhm.
just wafted into my living room. I had to shut the window. It smells awful, but it's legal.
It really does. But yeah, yeah, but it's still like you can get fined and it's a misdemeanor, but it's still illegal here. So, that's what threw me. I'm like, really? That's how we're getting down here? I guess my whole plan of avoiding this was just out the window. So much for
Yeah, you're
that.
better off
But
moving
it's
into
one of those things
DC in
where
case he ever gets caught with it on his person.
oh girl, I'm gonna murder him if he gets caught. I'm like, look, no, we're not doing this. You're not bringing that raunchy shit smell into my house. That's not happening. It's part of my language. Anyway, but I think it goes deeper in terms of the communities that are policed for things
Hmm.
like this. And the fact that Mr. Gringich, I always jack up it, Newt. I'm just gonna call him Newt because I always mess up his last name, and I'm laughing at the fact that his parents named him after a salamander. Anyway, the fact that he stated that crack and cocaine should have been sentenced equally and pursued
Hmm.
equally, and yet it is the crack that is more harshly pursued and punished. It is the communities of color that are more directly targeted and screened. It's just
Yeah, I think it's like now the big drug is heroin, right? And now there's a problem with drugs, and now
heroin and
right,
meth.
and now people are shouting for leniency and for kindness
Yeah,
to their
because
kids'
it's
Treat it like
addiction,
the disease it
and they treat
is. Because
right,
it's their
well, and they're
kids.
white kids, and I just remember how we were treated, and I just have no. I know it's terrible to say, but I have no sympathy. Like the things that they're going through were the same things that we were going through, but we weren't human enough for them to see it.
right.
And
And so
yeah,
it's kind of like it's like the small little petty retribution thing where you want them to feel the exact same pain
yeah, yeah,
that we have. But
terrible.
even then, like they have privilege in that because yet and still they won't see their punishment as in part being because of their race when it has usually explicitly
Mm-hmm.
been that for us. Our like Trevor Noah said, like in one of his like first stand-up features, and this like line sticks with me because he was born in apartheid South Africa in 1984. He's actually a few months older than me. But he was born a crime, being the son of a white man and a black
Mm-hmm.
woman, and that is essentially like we are essentially in the same boat. We were all born crimes, and so at some point in time,
Mm-hmm.
the state is only doing their due diligence to get us wrapped up and put where we belong, which is in the criminal justice system, because we are not quote unquote citizens. We are still always like denied our full
Mm-hmm.
humanity, the full recognition of our citizenship, despite the fact that we built this bitch from the ground up on land stolen from other people.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, just
And they
not,
take it a step further, like you said, to put us back in our place where they want us, which is a
yeah.
state of slavery, because the 13th Amendment allows for
I mean,
it.
if there's one thing that President Obama can do before he gets out, is to amend the damn 13th. Just have two words stricken from the Constitution. Just,
But the problem with that is that he can't even get them to sign off on regular laws, and it is something that requires
People coming
the
across.
backing of the
Yeah.
legislative branch. The legislative branch has
Yep.
to certify it. And we saw how many businesses are wrapped up in the legislation that we have. We know how many super PACs and special interests have their hands directly tied to a lot of the people that are in Washington. They won't even
I was
confirm
about to
his
say
judge. There's
he can't even
no
yeah.
get
way they're
his
letting him
judge
change that
confirmed, and he's
amendment.
white. So there's no
Mm-hmm.
way that would happen. But I think he's done everything he can do with the no help that he's had. But to do that, yeah, I
Most
highly doubt it.
obstruction is freaking Congress in the
Yeah.
history of America. I don't know if that's real or not, but it feels like it.
Oh.
Damn it.
So I was just so pleased at the diversity of the content experts and the folks that she had speaking. We had activists, we had folks that were formerly incarcerated that were had now created movements to assist those who are still incarcerated or those who are in activist
Mm-hmm.
spaces. We had former Black Panthers, current authors and politicians. But one thing I wanted to point out, Brian Stevenson, who's the lawyer and the author. I don't know if you've read his book Just Mercy, but if you haven't, you should. It took me several months to read it, not because it's a hard read from an intellectual standpoint, but from an emotional standpoint, it is devastating.
What's it
But it
called
is
again?
so good, and it is so Just Mercy. And it discusses, how he got involved in working on death row cases
Oh, okay.
and that challenge in terms of trying to get cases commuted and folks where they needed to be. And some of, obviously it's a blend of his successes and failures. But when you listen to the stories of these people he's fighting for that are sitting on death row who should
Right.
not be there, either because the evidence didn't support it, or even if the evidence supported, they are not of the presence of mind to have made the decisions
Mm-hmm.
that they made. So
Mental
it's a
health.
mental,
Yeah.
I forget what, thank you, not even a mental health. It's like, can you aid in your defense? I forget what that's called. It's a competency issue. There
Yeah.
it is. So there's a lot of that. And just listening to his fight and the barriers that they put in his way whenever he would try to visit the inmates, even though he was a lawyer, he's a lawyer, but he's a black lawyer. It's heartbreaking, but it is a really powerful book and a really good read.
Okay, I'll look for that. It's funny that you
Yeah.
mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk about a couple of people that were highlighted as well. Are y'all familiar with Jelani Cobb?
Yep. Yeah, he
Okay,
has
so
the interview. If you guys listen to This Week in Blackness, um, if it's
Mm-hmm.
still on iTunes, you'll have to look for it. But a few years ago, Elon James White had sit-downs with a handful of academics, and Dr. Cobb was one of the first few that he sat down with. And I want to say it's uh, that series of podcasts is called On Blackness. So
okay,
I recommend you checking that out. I hope
Mm-hmm.
it's still up. But
okay,
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he talks to Jelani Cobb. He talks to the Baratunde Thurston. He talks to Dr. Melissa Harris Perry. I want to say Dr. Blair Kelly and Dr. Anthea Butler. Yeah, just an amazing
Mm-hmm.
array of Black academics. So I highly recommend you to check those out.
okay.
I remember when that show dropped. I listened to it. It was just really
I have
great.
to look for that because I haven't heard that. But I was gonna say,
Mm-hmm.
are you guys familiar with the documentary "Policing the Police"? It's a PBS documentary.
No.
No, but it's funny you mentioned that because the place I work, just did
Uh
a
huh.
forum called
Uh huh.
"Policing the Police," and I was able to sit in afterwards to talk about, what went well and what could have been done better. And the one thing I pointed out, I was like, it's great that you had the police there and the president of the NAACP, and 3 academics. But what was glaring was the generations that were missing, which are the students and the young activists that are currently doing the
Mm-hmm.
work, and also the ones directly most often impacted by
Right.
these issues.
That's interesting.
It was glaring. So, but PBS usually puts a lot of their stuff on demand. So if it's out there, we could probably find it that way if that's another one we
Oh,
want to
it's
look at.
really good. It is Jelani, and he is studying New Jersey, which I'm trying to remember because I wrote up a review of it, but um, basically New Jersey got cited by the DOJ for
Mm-hmm.
multiple violations, and they got a new mayor, and so his whole documentary was going along with the police and seeing how they treated people,
Oh,
and
so he did ride-alongs?
he did ride-alongs,
Okay, so
and
it's
by
on
the
Frontline. Do you want me to send you the site?
yeah, it's really good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that'd be
something that we
great.
really need to look into reviewing, but it was infuriating because they didn't care that he was there. But it was good because they didn't care that he was there.
Mm.
So you got to actually see, how they truly treated people. And that was my first introduction to Professor Cobb. But that was a really good documentary.
Yeah, how
Okay.
Um,
and it doesn't matter.
Maybe we
I'm
should do
guessing
that
that
one
there are
next.
also Black cops on duty too, because what
oh,
people don't seem to
baby.
understand
Yes.
is that even like in the Freddie Gray case, like people thought that because some of the police officers that were involved in his death were Black, that it made it less of an issue. But what people failed to understand that it is not the color of the skin of the individual officers. Yes, cases where a white cop has, killed or terrorized, brutalized a citizen who is Black, the problem is only highlighted because of the race dynamics, but unfortunately, it
Mm-hmm.
is the structure of the police that even if you are Black, you have access to the same protections that, you know, that protects a white officer, and they even tried to minimize the the power dynamic when it is a Black cop and a Black citizen, but it's such a farcical argument, and it's a straw man. It really it's not the point. It's not the fact of the matter at all. It's the power dynamic that there are cops running out here and abusing citizens. And I am purposely saying the word citizens and or civilians because this is what people are not seeming to understand beyond black and white,
Mm-hmm.
that there are civil servants, people who are hired by the state out here executing and or abusing or worse, citizens, and they are not being properly reprimanded, or there are no charges being pressed, or they drag their feet about it. They all have the cover of law, but we as citizens don't have a way to redress them for their actions against us.
Yeah, let me be
Mm-hmm.
clear. Everyone that he rode with was black or brown. And the only people that were really white in the documentary were the chiefs or the managers, but they weren't actually in the ride-alongs. And yeah, you're exactly right. You
Mm-hmm.
hit it on the head. It wasn't a bunch of white cops doing that to people. It was people that look just like you and me doing
Yeah,
it. So
and let's not get it twisted. Like, you know, systemic white supremacy doesn't make black people exempt from applying the same like white. We can also be upholders of it as we are victims of it
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously. That's what makes this such a pernicious system.
hmm yeah, I agree. And to ride on the back of that, another one that they had on there they highlighted was Michelle Anderson. Are y'all familiar with her book, The New Jim Crow?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Michelle
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 Alexander.
Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that.
Listen, I bought
All
the
right.
Mm-hmm.
book and it's been
Yeah.
on my wish list for a long time. I was like in the middle of that watching the documentary the first time, and I went ahead and ordered it. Yeah,
It is eye-opening. And
yeah.
one thing that was really interesting was how she explained how slavery really started. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
similar to what you were just talking about with, even though they're black, their privilege is different than the ones that they're actually policing.
Mm-hmm.
So the way
Mm-hmm.
that slavery started was, of course,
You mean
they
slavery
came.
or patty rolling?
No, slavery, and but it all ties in. Bear with me for one
Okay.
second. So they came over here. They needed to, separate themselves from England, so they wanted to start growing their own crops, right? But they needed the labor. They couldn't
Mm-hmm.
get Native Americans to participate because Native Americans were going to fight, right? So they used indentured servitude,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't free labor; it's cheap labor,
Mm-hmm.
right? The initial slaves that came over, of course, we all know that they weren't all enslaved. They were indentured servants. The
Right.
first few that came over, right?
Yeah,
So
Mm-hmm.
it was
they were black and white indentured servants.
right. So it
Mm-hmm.
was working on these fields as indentured servants. You had blacks, you had whites, and you also had slaves. They actually started doing slavery at that time as well, right? Well, at one point, all three of those groups came together and they revolted,
Right.
right? And so they
Mm-hmm.
had to figure out how to keep this from happening again, and they created privilege. So what they did was they took the poor whites and they gave them the ability to, they didn't give them that much more privilege, but they gave them just enough privilege for them to feel that they were above anyone who's black. Because, see, to have a slave meant that it was, they couldn't do anything because they were powerless. You know, they didn't speak the language. They were unfamiliar with their weapons. So they knew if they took the poor whites and gave them just enough, like they gave them more access, they gave them a little bit more land, they gave them the ability to police slaves. So now you've created privilege and you made
Mm-hmm.
it so that these three groups will never revolt together again. And it's very similar to
Mm-hmm.
how cops are, right? Because cops don't have that much privilege, but they have just enough to where if they kill one of us,
Mm-hmm.
it's very unlikely that they'll ever get in trouble for it, much less, go to jail for it. And I found that super interesting. So I would definitely recommend the new Jim Crow. It's like an addition to watching this documentary.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think the most sort of influential one that kind of set that started the breakdown between indentured servants and different races was Bacon's Rebellion, which happened like the 1600s in
Yeah,
the
that's what I'm
colonies.
talking about.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Mm,
that's what I thought.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, but that scared them so much that they created just enough privilege for poor whites
Yeah,
to
and
where
I
they
think
felt like they
that's
were above.
when like the first, I guess, technical like slave codes really started to
Mm-hmm.
coalesce into actual legislation and social hierarchies and all that. Gosh, this country is. Mm-hmm.
Jacked up, for lack of a
Yeah,
better euphemism.
get over it, they say.
It's corrupt. It's just a level of
Mm-hmm.
corruption that is sickening. So much so that the gaslighting that is done around, well, it's meritocracy, and we
Mm-hmm.
all know that's a myth. But just to know how much of a myth it is because of how much corruption is just embedded in the DNA of this country is infuriating and a little
And
demoralizing, actually.
I kind of think,
And
how like
let's see.
typically, you white people don't understand like why Negroes are the way that we are. Always like kind of side-eyeing everything
Mm-hmm.
they do. Um, this is why,
Mm-hmm.
because we've always seen America at her complete worst. Like we've seen and
Yeah.
have experienced the worst, most violent manifestations of this country, and we have
Mm-hmm.
had to stay silent about it. And every time that we did get buck and try to tell white people about themselves, they cracked down on us harder than ever, and brutally
Brutally and
and
violently.
violently. Which, looking at the with Colin Kaepernick and his um, refusal to stand for the national anthem, the blowback from white people is absolutely insane. And
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
part of that is because they don't see him like they see themselves. And that is what is glaring, absolutely glaring. And they try to tell him how he should be doing this, who he should be addressing, and essentially trying to exercise this patriarchal, I'll tell you what you can do, boy, type of attitude towards him. And that's because at their core, they don't see us as fully human that can think for ourselves. Uh, and I kind of think we remind them that they ain't shit, and they know that we know their dirty little
Mm-hmm.
secret. And so when we dare open our
We're the
mouths,
lip.
they try to again
Yeah.
crack down on us.
We're the living reminder of their crimes
Yeah, because
against
there's not
humanity.
enough Native Americans apparently to remind them of themselves. Man,
No, they're still busy trying to complete that genocide.
man.
They're still busy trying to complete that genocide.
Uh,
So I'm wondering. Okay, there was one other thing I did want to address before we wrap up, and that is this. Two things actually. The first, was it you, Winter Rain, or you, Petty, that said you hadn't seen Birth of a
Me,
Nation?
I
wondering.
haven't seen like
Okay,
the new one.
the 1915
I
movie.
actually,
No. The 1915
yes, it was
movie.
actually it might still be on
That
Netflix. I know it was like a little while, probably like a year or so ago.
I was gonna
It might.
say I watched it years ago and I had to get the disc from Netflix. It is gross, but it's worth a
Really?
watch. It is worth the watch. It is worth the watch, if only to see some of the roots. Sorry, some of the roots of just what we're doing. Not those. It's not the roots because the 1915s weren't the roots, but just the twisted mindset of people who hold these
Mm-hmm.
ideals.
Yeah, I will be afraid to watch that. I'm afraid I'll be really infuriated. But you're probably right.
If you're gonna watch it, you need to find something light like Legends of Tomorrow, or something cute and funny to
No,
watch
this is
after, or be ready to go on a really long walk. But that might be dangerous because if you're near white people, you might wind up slapping one. And that's not me being offensive. For years, I could not watch Malcolm X and be around white people for a good 3 or 4 days after I watched that movie. So it just brings up something in you, just like, this is your history that you completely, well, racism didn't exist. The
Listen,
hell
white
it
people are
didn't.
so good at short-term memory. Like, they are so good at, like, sanitizing and, like, sanitizing the fuck shit that their ancestors used to do. Like, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing, to me. Like, like, I don't think people understand quite how badly these deaths of Black men, women, and children at the hands of the police are, like, reminiscent of lynching. And I know that there are a lot of dynamics that are completely different, but when you get that lynchings were, like, such a common occurrence that white people would just gather around and have big old freaking barbecues of not just Negroes, but, actual, like, ribs and stuff, and have cake and, you know, all that bunch of,
It
it
was
was
a
like a
party.
carnival. And it happened so much. They were sending postcards of lynchings. They had full write-ups of lynchings. Though if you go back to, like, if I go back to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and go through, like, old microfiche of the newspaper, there would be whole portions of the paper excised because they're trying to sanitize that part of their history. Because it, like the freaking KKK nationally in the 1920s was astronomical. There are like some 2 million plus Americans in the KKK. Freaking Donald Trump's father was arrested at a KKK rally in New York City. So there's a
No
lot of
surprise
stuff
there.
that, oh, there are a lot of people that have some shady shit in their history, and they try to pretend like they're so clean and that we should just get over this shit. But no, they have done so much that uh, that it's easier for them to just accept the, like, shit that their ancestors did, the way that we have to accept shit that happened to us, even though we had no fault in it either.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not even that long
But
ago.
the other,
Like, it's not that
Right.
long ago. So,
no, it's not.
yeah.
But yeah, the other thing that pissed me off, and this is just in us bringing it to a close, and it's kind of linked to Birth of a Nation in 2016. Everybody's upset. Oh, we didn't go see it. And I know people have talked about Queen of Cotway and other shows. Why was this documentary rated at an aggregate of 2.5 stars on
Wait, what?
Netflix?
The original Birth of a Nation?
No, no, the 13th. This documentary we just got through talking about. So when I logged
What?
in Friday to watch it and to take my notes and to live tweet
Right.
it, the aggregate rating was
Okay, I'm
two
gonna
and a
go
half
in and
Okay.
stars.
go ahead and, like, make that 5. Are
Right.
Wait,
I
are
need to
they
do that
aggregating
too.
from people that actually update, or do you have to, like, log in and write something? Because sometimes if you,
No, you don't have to log in and write something, but you do
okay,
have to rate it in your
okay, I'm gonna rate
Netflix.
it.
But it just pissed me off because I know there were some trolls that went in like, oh my gosh, that did it just to be nasty. But then I'm wondering, I just, maybe I'm
No, 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 no.
hypersensitive
Mm-mm.
when it comes to being a black woman
No.
and basically how we are basically treated as the mules of America, not only by whites, but by every other group,
Mm-hmm.
including black men. So I'm really hypersensitive right now, and I own that. It just pissed me off.
No, I mean, that's a fair point.
Because even if you, like I said, the first 30 minutes I was sitting there, I was like, oh, Ava, honey, we knew all this. So I was waiting for the part that we didn't know. And she did get to it, but I was worried the first 30 minutes. But then for me, it picked it up at the 30-minute mark and we were good to go. I still would have given it 5 stars, even with that criticism.
Yes.
But for it to have 2.5 stars means people were consistently rating it
Yeah.
at a 1, and that was probably just to be
Mm-hmm.
asses. And I'm just like,
But I also don't think
I'm
that
sorry, I'm
we,
gonna stop ranting.
no, but
I'm
I don't think
just,
that we rate like that. I, I think
you don't
I
think?
think it it didn't occur to me to rate, and I loved it. I think that
Hmm.
that might be a part of it. If you're the kind of person that actually rates a movie. I don't think that there's a lot of us that probably did. They probably loved it. We probably watched it, but we didn't put in the 2 cents to say it was great. Like, it's no
Yeah, I have
different
to
than
remind myself.
when
Oh yeah,
I
Rod
I
have to
rate
Karen
remind
every
myself to
time
do
I'm
that.
Yeah, it's no different than
every time
giving
I'm in
somebody a
Netflix and I watch
5-star
something.
review. You know, we love it and we'll tell them we love it on Twitter, but will we go back and tell them how much we loved it by taking the time to go to iTunes and logging in and writing a review?
Hmm.
So it's no different. I
And
just
see,
think
I
that's
know
how
the
it
app.
is.
I have I have the app on my Xbox, and I have a smart TV with it. So what happens is when the movie's done, or even if it's a TV episode, it'll put the little box in the top corner and then show you things that are linked. But right under the top box it says rate this title, and I always, no matter what I'm watching, I go immediately there and hit rate. But I guess that's just me.
I don't do that. I need to do that more often, especially for ours. I really do.
No, I rated it already.
Yeah,
I'll do it
yeah.
tonight.
Oh, that made me so mad to see that. I was just like, because and honestly, it wasn't even about the people that didn't rate it. It was about the assholes
Just
that went in there and
yeah.
deliberately did
Yeah,
that. That's what was making me
of
angry.
course. But
So
but we
all of
all
you
contribute to
listening,
it. That's
watch it and watch it and rate it honestly. Like if you only thought it was 4 stars, fine, but give it a rating that is fair. Because I don't think that 2.5 stars was fair. I feel like that 2.5 stars was kind of a targeted attack.
yeah.
And maybe I'm paranoid, and I own that, but that's just how I feel.
No, I agree
So
with you.
yeah, there's
I agree.
anything else before we wrap up?
Um. So, Birth of a Nation, the original film, is no
Yes.
longer on Netflix.
Oh,
Streaming or period?
Streaming. But
Okay.
if you do want something comedic to watch, you should. It is on Amazon Video. It's called CSA, the Confederate States of America. It's actually a British mockumentary about what would happen if the Confederacy won the Civil War. Now, I haven't
oh
seen
my
it in a
gosh.
couple years, so I might rent it just to watch it again. But it is freaking hilarious. So if you if you end up watching something awful and you just need a pick me up, try that one because it had me like in fucking stitches. Now, the Confederate States of
Sounds
America.
good.
I'll keep that in mind.
Cool. So I think that's it for us. I've got this baby that I'm taking who is screaming. I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but I can't. So I need to go out here and find out what's going on because the kids are not able to handle him. As I mentioned, this show will be on the premium feed on the free feed this weekend coming up. And then after that, it'll be on our premium feed. So if you're interested, you like what you heard, and you want to hear more from the DocuDrunks, consider
We're hopefully gonna
subscribing.
find something
If you have,
fun.
Yeah.
we'll balance this off. It won't
Yeah.
all be
Yeah,
heavy
Can't
but
do
stuff.
nothing like this.
If you want to shoot
listen,
us,
this
Not back to back.
documentary.
if you want to shoot us some,
What do you guys rate this documentary? Just on how many martini glasses do you give this? 1 to 5.
Oh,
I'll give
I
it
give it a
5.
Okay.
I give it a
5
5.
with a
martini
little squeeze
glasses.
of lemon on top.
I-
Yeah, it's a really
Yeah.
good documentary.
And a major shout out and thank you to Ava DuVernay for another
Mhm.
masterful piece. I love her. Absolutely
Yeah.
love her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have feedback for us, or there's a documentary you want to hear us cover, shoot us an email. There are 2 different ones you can use: the movietrailerreview@gmail.com or mtrailerreviews@movietrailerreviews.net. Our contact information, Twitter handles will be in the show notes.
You can
And
hashtag us
then until
DocuDrunks.
next time, yes, you
Use
can.
that.
And we will hopefully, we're going to have to be
Please
really, really
do.
lit for the next one because I kind of sobered up.
Yeah. Couldn't help but sober up to this subject matter.
Well, if we're recording on Sundays, I'm a lightweight, so I probably will never be drinking.
Oh dear.
If we
Yeah,
do
we're
a
gonna have to.
Saturday, maybe
Listen,
we
we're
could do something.
Yeah, we can do that.
DocuDrunks at brunch. Shit.
Right.
So thanks for listening, everybody. Until
Bye.
next
Bye.
time. Bye.